Responding to controversy has a long history, scandal, cover-ups, etc. They have, deep protocols of denial, avoidance, etc. And most of the time, people with concerns have not had a voice, particularly when there's a power dynamic. Now, as a founder of the community, one of the biggest issues is likely to be in the initial stages of community dealing with, for example, lapses of my own character, deviation from guidelines. And this is likely for a number of reasons. Number one, what I'm outlining is an ideal that is in contrast to much and most of the life that I have lived. And in order to move from the known life to, a 10x life, one must enter the unknown. One must go through a certain amount of chaos, first of all. And traumatized individuals, such as myself, are very resistant to surrendering to the unknown because the unknown harbors the possibility of re-traumatization or new traumatization. And so trauma survivors are always very scared of change and being out of control. And so, it's absolutely certain that, there will be gaps where, I'm able and willing to have a taste of this new identity and it feels too new. So I want to live my old identity that I'm more familiar with, right? But the old identity is divergent from the new identity. So you have, a certain form of schizophrenia. Well, everyone has a certain sense of schizophrenia. A priest is not feeling priestly all of the time. In 99% of cases, they're, masturbating at night, watching porn because they have to be celibate and all of this, and doing all this and and then they're trying to give a good sermon when they're giving a sermon and all of that. So there's all this schizophrenia in the culture. And the biggest issue, I experienced it when I was sexually abused by a Human Awareness Institute facilitator, because the Human Awareness Institute, is committed to creating love and intimacy and sexuality and being at choice and, everyone winning. So that's the party line. But Peter Sandhill had other ideas of betraying his wife and, his therapeutic agreements and all of this stuff, and pursuing his lust with one of his clients. And so there's this split between, Peter the healer and the facilitator and the husband and all of that, and Peter the curious adolescent, who doesn't have the discipline and integrity to honor boundaries. And so when this came up, the entire organization went into overkill to try and kill the story, cut me off from the email accounts. Nobody can know, getting angry at me if I talked about telling the community what happened. And it's partly a relic of the shame punishment protocol, that if someone does something incompetent, they deserve to be punished. And nobody likes being punished. So if they do something incompetent, and if everyone knows they deserve to be punished, then obviously they have to work hard to make sure that nobody knows. And punishment is not the best paradigm for responding to incompetence. The best paradigm is making amends, something that Peter seems to be incapable of doing, and that the Human Awareness Institute seems incapable of doing, is making amends to counteract the negative impact. Gee, we did this, and this, and it hurt you. This is why it hurt you, and here's how we're going to undo the hurt. That's a rebalancing healing paradigm. We caused dis-ease, we caused unnecessary suffering through our ignorance, our incompetence, our fear, and now we're going to balance that by providing medicine. But in a fear, shame-based thing, there's denial, there's defense. No, I didn't do it. It's a little hard to deny it when there's a 10-hour, audio recording of all of the abuse. But still, there's the whole focus is on controlling the data so that as few people as possible see what's going on, basically. Now, this is a disastrous protocol because then nobody learns what's going on until they are abused. And then they weren't prepared for the abuse because they didn't get any warning. Whereas if you understand that this person abuses 1% of the people they're communicate with in this way, and this other person abuses 2% of the people they communicate with in this other way, and because nobody is perfect, and abuse just means the absence of optimal use. If you abuse a hammer by throwing it into an ocean and letting it rust until it falls apart, it's an abused hammer. If you abuse a person by punching them until their eyes don't work, that's not good use. And so the remedy to abuse is good use. And it's also very important to understand that things are not, there are not good guys and bad guys overall. There are right and wrong behavior in a given context, and in a given context, one person may be, occupying the position of the wrong behavior. Now, the wrong behavior is not some, abstract deity saying, "Thou shalt not do this." The wrong behavior is the behavior that creates unnecessary suffering that doesn't have a benefit. In other words, chronic unnecessary suffering. Getting up and going to the gym so that you can lose weight, so that you will enjoy more walks with your partner, has benefit. But injecting arsenic is bad or wrong behavior because it's not leading to a better place. It's leading to chronic disease. If you kill yourself and leave your friends and family behind, then they have the suffering of grief and your absence, and you had the suffering of dying a miserable death, and so it's a chronic state of suffering. And so that's really the continuum that we're dealing with, is in right and wrong, is of the options available, the right option is the one that creates the most sustainable well-being for the most people with the least expenditure of energy. That's the right decision to make. The right investing decision to make is the one that exposes your capital to the least risk and creates the highest sustainable profits over time. That's a good investment. That's a right investment. A wrong investment is you put endless amounts of money in, it never gives a dividend, there's no profits, and you lose all your money. That's a wrong investment. And so within that framework, it's really important to understand the skill set within the community, but particularly people in a leadership role. So what happens because we all have little hubs of authority. What happens if I'm in the bakery or chatting with the baker in the community, and I see some flour gets tipped over on the floor, where there's some, the floor wasn't clean. It looked like some chemicals had spilled there before, and then the baker puts the flour back and puts it in the bread dough because they don't want to waste flour. Well, I might say, hey, that I don't want to eat that bread. Yeah, but nobody will know, right? No. You need to start that dough over again. No, I'm not going to do that. Well, in a traditional situation, this becomes gossip, right? But the important thing is that people make an informed decision. You do not have any real choice if you do not have data. So, for example, when the Human Awareness Institute went to great lengths to hide the fact that one of their leaders was sexually abusing a certain amount of their clients, nobody got to make a real choice about whether to work with Peter Sandhill or not. Because the part of the equation was hidden. Now you can think of the same and why falsifying the books of a company, why this is a crime. Because it is. You can go to jail as an accountant if you hide some of the company's expenses. Because if you hide part of the liability, then the company looks very profitable. So if someone says, my costs are $1 a sock, and I sell the sock for $5, which means I've got a 400% profit for every sale, and I've got as many socks as I can produce, I've got a market for them. Well, someone might loan you the money to start a factory based on that data. But if it turns out that there was another expense around making the sock that costs $5 per sock, that was just deleted out of the equation. Now suddenly every sock that is sold loses $1. It doesn't have a 400% profit. It doesn't have any profit. It's lost money. And that's not a good thing to invest in. And so, this is the reason that an accurate data set, an uncorrupted data set, is the most valuable thing that you can give an intelligent human being. Because some people will say, I don't care about that. It'll toughen me up. I'll eat the bread. And some people will say, I'm never buying from that baker again because who knows when they're going to do that, when Dane isn't there reporting the issue. Because that's an attitude, that's a value set. And he didn't want to share it this time, but he's forced to. But most of the time he's baking alone. I'm not eating that bake. See, people become empowered. So the protocol around controversy, disputes in leadership, etc., what would be good if somebody sees me doing the opposite of what I'm talking about here, right? Because that's part of the old identity. The ideal thing is that everyone who engages with me understands how much that happens, what happened, why it happened, and whether it's likely to continue and at what rate, number one. And also the impact, like if you do this protocol, this is likely to be the impact. But if you do this protocol, this is likely to be the impact. Because if everyone knows that and makes decisions accordingly, then the threat of being blindsided is eliminated. And there can be a challenge. I mean, if the majority of the community does not want to buy bread from that baker because of this recurring pattern, there may need to be a new baker in the community. If the majority of Peter Sandhill's clients learn that he may seduce them, in vulnerable moments, and charge them money for a love affair, they may say, gee, that doesn't sound safe. I'm not going to start. Well, then Peter may need to get another job. Punishing him, whether he stays in the job or is not the point. The point is to pair someone who has competency with a role that they can and are willing to do well. Because if you have incompetent people that people don't realize are incompetent people, then you create chronic unnecessary suffering. And so and then there can be an educational process. So my thought is you take a photo of the situation, the flower, the thing, etc. You share the interaction. If the baker disputes any of it, they list specifically what they dispute. Do they dispute the existence of the photograph, or what is it? And this could then engage most of the rest of the community, because it's really important to know which data set to rely on. Because if you have two completely divergent stories, you've got a threat, because it means someone's lying. And someone lying in a small group like this undermines the trust in the group. So you need to find out who's lying. But in such a small community, it's very hard to lie. So really what you get are differences in values. Maybe the flower just spilled on some dirt, but it's organic dirt. There's no chemicals present. And I just feel that dirt is icky because I was raised in a Western culture. And, the response is, a little bit of dirt never killed anyone. It's organic dirt. No big deal. So then you have a value tension. So-and-so doesn't want to throw out organic flour that has a little bit of dirt in it. And I think the purity of the flour is the most important thing, and that it should be wasted. Well, now all we need to do is say, this is what happened. This is why I'm against it, for these, and these reasons. And the other person just says, this is what happened, this is why I'm for it, for these reasons. And now everyone can make an informed decision. And if no one gets sick who ate the bread, and if flour wasn't wasted, then we've maybe the way it's resolved in the community is that the baker agrees that any time he bakes bread with flour that's spilled on the ground, he will alert batch has 0.1% dirt in it, and people can do what they want with that information. And so that's the iteration to get to focus on the concern, the reason, to focus on 100% transparency. And over time, with the same 150 people, everyone gets to learn what's really right and wrong. I mean, if people keep getting stomach sick every time they believe the baker and his version of it's all fine, then over time, people don't want to get sick, so they'll stop eating the bread. And over time, the baker will switch to, you're right, there is a harm, and everyone will know what's going on. So I'm really excited about this iteration in transparency, because it's also very uncomfortable to be put on a pedestal. And in this larger framework of this is a good person, this is a bad person, as opposed to this is a person who's doing these things that have some pluses and minuses around them, and doing these things that have some pluses and minuses around them. And we all have the choice to engage with a good data set.